The labels that we allow people to give us matter so much. I used to be called difficult, and I really took that on board. It was interesting. I actually found out through a friend who hired me for something when I used to be a choreographer. As we got closer, she said to me, I've always known that you had this reputation for being amazing, for being so talented, but for being difficult. And I remember I took that on and I internalized it and I felt shame. And I would, be in professional situations and I basically would suppress my voice because I was trying not to be difficult, to just be go with the flow, to be easygoing. And it wasn't until later where I started to do a lot more personal development and mindset work and really look at things through a much more critical and reflective eye, that I started to realize that the things that people were saying I was difficult about were actually crazy. So, for example, I used to fly out to dance studios and I would choreograph kind of all day, and it would be a place that I didn't live. So I would fly there and they would be responsible. They would have someone pick me up and take me to a hotel and then pick me up and take me to the studio. And often, it was these 12-hour days. And so I would say things like, I need coffee. You have to give me a lunch break. I can't work for 12 hours with no food. Those were the things that were difficult. There was another time I was at this dance competition and they were just so strict about time. And I remember the two lady judges that I was with were literally crossing their legs in pain because they needed to go to the bathroom. And I was like, why don't you ask? And they were like, no, we're afraid. And I finally was like, this is ridiculous. And I put my hand up. I was like, stop the competition. And I was like, we need a bathroom break. And the people running it were kind of annoyed. But and they sort of said to me like that I'm so difficult. And then these two female judges sprinted to the bathroom. And I remember sitting there and she was like, don't you need to go? I was like, no, I'm asking for them. And I keep telling you, you think I'm difficult, but it's not me. You're not meeting our basic human needs. And I remember them looking at that and being like, oh, it isn't you, is it? But it really took me a lot of time to sort through that and realize that I wasn't actually being difficult. Well, I was being difficult in their eyes, but really it's just that I wasn't convenient to them. It's that I had a voice. It's that I stated my needs. I said, this is right or wrong. You can't do this. It was that I had a voice. It was that I stood up for myself. Is that I spoke my needs, and not in an aggressive way, but just I have to be fed. This is the way it goes. So why this matters so much is that shame is a deeply repressive emotion. So where we feel shame, we repress ourselves. We repress qualities of ourselves. And so whatever we link shame to, like being difficult, we will repress. And it's not even necessarily that conscious. It's like shame gets linked to something and we start repressing it. And we very often, there's parts of ourselves that I like to think of it as like painted with the brush of shame. And so we've repressed. Maybe you were bold and outspoken. Maybe you were edgy and artistic. Maybe you have a really big personality and people called you too much and you painted it with this brush of shame and then repress. What we actually want to do in those situations is to refine those qualities. So maybe when we're young, we're really bold and outspoken. And as we grow, we can refine that. We can become more self-reflected, maybe a little bit more tactful without completely shutting off the boldness. When we just blanket shut off a whole part of ourselves, that's when we become fragmented. That's when we compartmentalize pieces of ourselves. And then we're not a whole, authentic being, which is what we want. And so pride is really the antidote for shame. If we look at this societally, we can see entire minorities have taken back words that were used to shame them. The gay community has taken back the word queer. The African American community has taken back the N-word. There's this power in taking back a word or a quality that was once linked to shame and instead linking it to pride. And very often the aspects of ourselves that give us our greatest, most authentic, most powerfully magnetic edge are parts of ourselves that stood out, especially when we were younger, and so we've attached shame and repressed them. But when we can have pride in those elements of ourselves, they come back up and we become expansive. We get to expand into our true selves. And it's interesting because something I noticed along this journey, when I started out, I was a hypnotherapist and had very therapy focused training. And there was a lot of training around professionalism, but in a very repressed way. It was basically like repress your emotions, repress your authenticity. You've got to show up and be professional. But through this, felt to me like this very suppressed, inauthentic lens. And if I even look at some of the people that were teaching that, I feel like they're very repressed human beings in hindsight. And it's interesting because, the whole point of the professionalism was to follow this code of ethics, but a lot of the people that were teaching this or embodying this kind of professionalism did things that to me are completely horrific. And so, this is where I started to look at it of what is the actual goal here? Well, it's to hold yourself to a certain standard. And for me, that meant really looking inwards and going, okay, what is my internal compass? What is my internal value system? And how can I honor that? How can I trust what I know is right or wrong? For me, it's I don't want to hurt someone. I don't want to disempower someone. And so that matters to me more than the professional tone in which I write an email, right? If I'm writing a professional tone to someone in the name of professionalism and ethics, but it's actually a very hurtful email, which I've been on the receiving end of, then it's like, what's the point? I'm repressing myself for no reason. And so what I want you to look at is what are elements of yourself that you might have linked shame to that are really who you truly are? And how could you step into that? How could you own that in a deep and profound way? So I'll give you some examples. When I started this career, I was a nerdy professional, I like to call it. I got these glasses and I got these dress shirts that I would never wear normally. And I tried to present myself a certain way. Now, my background is as a choreographer. I love music. I love artistry. And when I think about sort of like my dream vision, it's that I would be expressed and my brand would almost have this pop art kind of edgy quality. That is really who I am in my heart. And I'm moving more and more into that. That is my most authentic expression. And I know that people won't like that. And people might even shame me on the internet, but I am proud of that and who I am. And the more I step into that, the more powerful and magnetic I become. And the more I connect with my ideal clients. I have someone that I'm working with right now, and she would say is kind of woo-woo. She's spiritual and she does plant medicine. And she feels like that's something that's an element of shame. And a lot of the work that we're doing is getting her to own that on such a deep level. And I know, because I've seen this in the past, when she feels the utmost pride in that, no matter what anyone else says, she's going to be such a different version of herself. And I know because I've been around people who do exactly the same thing and are so proud and in complete ownership of what they do that it's almost like the owning of it transforms people around them because it's so powerful. I worked with a guy a little while ago and he was this really amazing guy. He had built this multi-million-dollar business and he was young. He was like 32 and I can't remember the word he used in the beginning. I think it was like controlling or reactive or something. And he was talking about he has this bigger vision and he gets really frustrated sometimes doing this and doing that. And I think he had been shamed by people around him for being, too this or too that or too much or too whatever. And these are the kind of people that I love to get to because what I helped him see is no, there's nothing wrong with you. You're a born leader. You're a visionary. You have this way bigger vision and mission that you're supposed to fulfill than anyone that's around you. And they're not going to understand because most of the people that you're surrounded with are, for lack of a better word, more ordinary. They don't see the extraordinary you. And as long as you take on all of these things that people are saying, you're going to miss stepping into the leader and the visionary that you are. So it's not about repressing your big picture thinking, not about repressing your controlling nature. It's about elevating that from being controlling to being a leader, to giving you the skills that you need to really own your company, and communication skills are part of it, but that's really the surface level thing. I had a woman a little while ago who I worked with, and she said, I have a degree in communications, but it wasn't until I worked with you that I was actually able to communicate from a place of power and truth. And I just love that. And that's the thing. It's, can we be and own the power of who we truly are? And that comes from owning and taking pride in the very things that we think we're going to be shamed for. But in order to do that, we have to stop shaming ourselves and instead start empowering ourselves, start taking pride in the very things that you're afraid of other people seeing. And when you do that, it will change your life. And so what I want you to do, you can do this as a meditation or as a journaling exercise, but whatever you do, I want you to have a really honest reflection and conversation with yourself and say, what is the thing that I'm hiding? What do I carry shame for? What is the thing that I'm afraid of people seeing about me? And what if I owned that? What if I took such pride in who I am, all of the parts of myself? And an exercise that can be really helpful in getting you kind of over the hump, because I know for a lot of us there's fear that comes up in this, is to imagine looking back. Imagine yourself 10 years from now looking back. If you were to feel regret, what would you feel regret for? Would you feel regret for owning all that you are, for leaning into your edge and your truth, your authenticity and your vulnerability? Or would you feel regret for staying repressed and being the same as everybody else? Be honest with yourself. What would you actually feel? And if you can hold this big picture perspective and look at that timeline through this lens, I think it's going to really help you shift the pain. Really, our mind is designed to move us away from pain. And so a lot of times we've got the pain of rejection and fear in front of us. Like, what if I step forward into my most authentic self? But when you think about the big picture and you think about hindsight, it's kind of like that pain moves behind you. And the pain of regret, the pain of not becoming everything you are, suddenly becomes stronger. And that's when we can tap into the courage to have pride in who we are and move forward. But you deserve to be you. The world needs you fully, authentically expressed. It doesn't need another person that's half hiding in order to fit in and be like everybody else. You're not like everybody else. Don't try to look like anyone else. Don't try to sound like anyone else. Don't try to be like anyone else. Be you. Be proud of who you are. We are all a work in progress. So whatever things you think make you not worthy, they're not actually true. You get to be you. You get to be the work in progress, because who you are is beautiful. And as you allow yourself to be it, you will become more of it. You become the greatest version of yourself by expressing it, not by repressing it. So I hope this was helpful. I really encourage you to do these exercises. I know they'll be so transformative for you. And I'm Michael Edwards. Thank you for joining me, sending you lots of love, and bye for now.